Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Borden, and I'm the Corporate Vice President of Worldwide Financial Services here at Microsoft. I am excited to welcome you to my first episode of my new series, The Borden Line. The financial services industry is evolving quickly with expanding customer demands, disruptive competition, and new technology-fueled innovation that is coming rapidly every day. Financial institutions' ability to adopt the right digital strategies is becoming more critical than ever. That's why I want to use this series to open a line of conversation with thought leaders and innovators and discuss the latest trends, hot topics, insights, and real solutions across the industry. My first guest is Jim Marous. For many of you, he needs no introduction. Jim advises on all components of digital transformation within the financial services industry. He's an internationally known keynote speaker, co-publisher of the Financial Brand, owner and publisher of the Digital Banking Report, and is host of his own fantastic retail banking podcast, Banking Transformed. Jim always has great insights and perspectives, and I'm thrilled he's joining me here today. So let's get started. Hey, Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Bill. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate you joining me on my first episode. So I want to start with thematics in 24, but I want to start in 23 because those really have an impact around what's happening in 24. So look, 23 was a year of uncertainty and volatility driven by many factors, as you've discussed a lot, right? Inflation, rising interest rates, recession, geopolitical issues. So a lot going on in 23. And then this little thing called AI was also introduced, and the acceleration and use of that technology brought to life and being consumable became real. So with all of that, I want to get into the trends, right? You've done some new research in retail banking on trends in 24, the impact of those trends from 23 going into that. So tell me what your thoughts are. What are the dominant themes that have emerged from your research?
You know, it's interesting, Bill. Some of the things you brought up are certainly high up on the research. Number one, every organization has been impacted by the economic uncertainty globally. So it's not just interest rates. It's the concern about what's happening next. So the uncertainty is more than what is actually on the books right now. And I think what's interesting is you look back and, geez, it's been 4 years now since COVID. COVID was a cakewalk compared to economic uncertainty. And I don't take that lightly. Certainly from a healthcare standpoint, it wasn't a cakewalk. But really, when you look at the COVID period, it was really about how we're going to work as opposed to anything else. Economic uncertainty has made it so that organizations have had to prioritize what they're going to do next, have had to look at what is going to change the industry, and realizing that more than ever, the consumer and the small businesses are really driving where banking has to go in the future. And you brought up the fact that, you know, in November of 22, generative AI was introduced with OpenAI, and instantly, both on a consumer basis and a corporate basis, it really changed our vision on what could be. Now, one thing that our trends and predictions showed was that there's still a very high number when you look at organizations wanting to create great experiences for their customers. There's also a very high reality that organizations want to personalize the experiences more. When you look at generative AI and AI in general, that really is pretty much, when you look at data and analytics and AI, the foundation upon which those two elements are built. When you look at experiences and we look at the personalization. And I'll say one major change that we've seen is a trend away from trying to generate great experiences to generating greater engagement. Now, that's a nuance a little bit, but it's meaning that there's activity between the consumer and the financial institution. And that activity is important because one thing that we've seen in the economy and in the business industry overall is the concept of loyalty, the concept of primacy has changed dramatically. You know, I'm in front of 300 bankers in a room, and I ask, how many of you have opened a major financial relationship in the last 5 years? Or I'm sorry, closed a major primary relationship in the last 5 years, and almost nobody raises their hands. I then ask, remember, bankers, how many of you have opened a new financial relationship in the last 2 years? And the entire room raised their hands. I ask everybody to look around and say, This is a concern, guys, because what's happened is people no longer are staying with their primary financial institution. They're looking for options and they're opening options, which makes it so your likelihood of a relationship, of loyalty, of consistent engagement is lower. So really the primary elements of getting to know your customer better, providing better experiences, driving greater engagement using data and analytics is at the top of the list. Now, that said, while they say those are the top elements that they want to apply all their focus on, the challenge is it's more talk than action. We're not seeing the investment in these elements. It's more of a wait and see. We hear a lot. I mean, there's not a meeting I get into or a conversation I get into. We're not talking about generative AI within 3 minutes. The challenge is there's a whole lot of talk and much less action, except from the biggest financial institutions.
So great feedback and great focus on the idea of not just knowing your customer, but really understanding your customer in depth, and then being able to respond in whatever ways those customers have the ability to engage with you as an institution as they live their life. And so that's been talked about a lot. The idea of what generative AI can do to actually extend that even further, Jim, is really interesting. I'm curious to hear what you're hearing from those bankers that you're talking to around the extent that generative AI can extend what they've been trying to do around personalization and customer experience even more.
You know, it's interesting, Bill. I think what I'm feeling is that organizations are starting to get the belief that while AI really built better models around what a consumer may look like or how I can personalize, generative AI, because its ability to actually build a dialogue, to create a dialogue, is really about not only building the what does the model tell us, but what do we want to ask to build that model. And, you know, I had an interview with Brian Romley, who's a good friend, and we had a two-parter interview talking about what is the potential, what's the dream of generative AI. And he goes, you could end up with a digital twin of every customer through generative AI that can respond to questions being asked, but then take actions of that question to build a better model. Can make it so that, Bill, you have a relationship with your financial institution, either with, let's say, the same financial institution, but through this dialogue, different models are being created with the consumer authorizing that they will do that, they'll share information. But with information, we're going to be able to drive a much higher value of relationship for the consumer than was possible before. I mean, as I look at it, if the consumer gives approval, like they do at Amazon for their Prime account, to share information, both internal and external, you're going to be able to generate a relationship, activity, engagement at a level never before possible if you take that step. Now, as I said, we're all loving the idea of not only creating what should you do next. I call it the GPS of financial services, very much like your GPS system on your car. It just doesn't tell you where to go. It tells you how to avoid pitfalls, how to take advantage of nice traffic patterns to get you to the place with the least amount of pain, effort, and friction. That's what I believe generative AI is going to provide us with, is the ability to reduce the friction, increase the personalization, and really increase the value of the relationship between the financial institution and the consumer.
No, that's really great insights and great analogies to what this feels like, right? The idea of creating the digital twin of a customer. I love that concept. It's almost taking from, the manufacturing industry around creating digital factories, actually creating the digital twin of a customer and having a view around that and how that customer could respond is just an awesome idea. I love that image. We've also heard it on the banker side as well, Jim, right? Around creating the digital twin of the banker or the advisor, right? Being able to be there to be in a position with the human advisor, actually have his digital buddy with him to actually be able to respond quickly. So you're hearing those types of analogies around how this technology can be applied. And then you talked about the value that creates around the customer relationship from a stickiness point of view and how they want to actually extend more. And as long as you're showing them value, them sharing even more information with you to actually do more with them to serve their needs. Those are awesome foundational pieces. And what's really interesting, you mentioned it earlier around, there's a lot of talk about it, but then getting started. So when I talk to customers around the world, there's not a shortage of use cases. We've talked about a couple around how this could work. The question is, what's the return and how to get started and how do you build momentum around getting this technology to work? As you know, actually in an environment where institutions don't like risk, they tend to try to mitigate risk and manage it, but now you actually have to take some risk around this. But what are you hearing around how organizations are looking at return and the use of this technology and seeing return so that they can continue to invest in it?
It's interesting, Bill, and I've been a banker for a long time. I mean, it goes back. That's where I started my career when I came out of university. And it's interesting because one of the things that banking industry tends to always fall into as a default is how do I reduce costs? Generative AI can make you more efficient. Generative AI can make it so you reduce costs overall and can really drive great returns on investment, very much like AI has done from the beginning. I mean, you go back to the origins of AI, it was used initially in the risk and fraud areas. How do I reduce that? How do I reduce the cost of mistakes and errors and faulty, decision making? Well, generative AI is going to be interesting because it takes it to another level. And you talked about the whole issue of risk. Financial institutions, to maximize the opportunity or the value of an engagement with using generative AI, is going to have to look and say, I'm not going to avoid risk. I'm going to manage risk. Now that, again, another one of these nuances, but the reality is if a bank doesn't realize that in order to get the biggest value, you need to dig deeper into the core and into the relationship value. And by doing so, you're going to generate more revenue. I think most use cases today, if you judged it based on revenue, it's going to be a cost reduction decision. It's going to be replacement of an AI tool for a human. It's not looking at the blend, which I really believe we're going to see a whole lot more towards with humans and machines. And it's certainly not one of these elements where they're looking first and foremost at how do I drive a better value to the consumer to generate a better relationship. That's where I see it going. I think the real value is going to be seen by those organizations, such as one of your clients, Ally, who I interviewed, and how they've really taken these tools and said, yes, we can build efficiencies, but what we're really trying to do is how can we make it so that we reinforce our brand as a customer advocate on their financial journey towards financial wellness. When you take that as an overall context, you're going to be able to generate stronger relationships, more value, and I believe a better return that's less immediate and less tangible than that immediate, I replaced Bob or Sue in the back office. And I think, when you look at to do this correctly, it's the integration of both human and digital, and most importantly, I believe, it's the democratization of the results of the generative AI journey. So if you can share the results of that journey with other employees, with other departments, with product managers, with product developers, with all these people, that's where your values can be maximized. And as you said earlier, that's going to take some commitment and trust within the organization, because we're used to getting reports once a month to show us what we've already done. Generative AI gives the opportunity to look at what you've done instantly in a way that says, here's where the overall value is to the organization and may not be to an individual.
And the idea of using generative AI and getting to that is a buildup from the digital transformation journey that many institutions have elected to move forward with, right? And it is a transformation journey. That transformation journey involves technology, but it also involves culture and how you think about risk and risk management and security and change management as well. But that is a journey that you have to go on and make a decision to go on at pace and scale. And so I'm curious to hear kind of what you're seeing around institutions that have figured out how to actually accelerate that journey, right? Because there are a lot who are moving slow, and there are a lot who have kind of figured out how to accelerate that journey, whether it's around how they've made decisions or organize themselves or how they've started projects. But I'm curious to get your thoughts around how institutions can actually kind of think about breaking through to feel comfortable about accelerating the change.
Bill, before we got on the podcast today, we talked a little bit about the whole dynamic of podcasting. And as you learn along the journey, I think the biggest learning I've had in the 4 years that we've had the Banking Transformed podcast is how important leadership is to the entire process. And what I mean by that is I genuinely believe today that you can't buy yourself into a good transformation process. You can buy all the technology in the world, but that does not guarantee you're going to be able to fulfill all the obligations of the transformation journey, which, as you referenced, is not an endpoint. You're never going to get to the endpoint. It's about overall transformation. But the reality is, if you don't have leadership that's willing to embrace change, because nobody likes change and we all have legacy. And in fact, your leaders in financial institutions probably have 30 years of legacy at that financial institution, surrounding themselves with people very much like them that came up through the ranks with them. And oh, by the way, I can easily say that there's not but a few financial institutions that have not had consistent earnings year to year to year. It may not be an even path, but they've not lost money. So what happens is, what will make leadership actually embrace something that will be inherently painful because it's going to be change? But if you don't have leadership that's going to embrace change, going to take managed risk, in other words, manage risk as opposed to avoiding risk, and disrupt themselves and their organization with a future view of what's going to happen, you will not succeed in digital transformation. You cannot invest enough. Now, if you have that vision, if your leadership does embrace change, if they are willing to take risks, they're going to find composable solutions that are going to allow them to do what other organizations much bigger than them took decades to do in a matter of quarters. And the reason being, the solutions out there in the marketplace based on fintech organizations, based on great solution providers, can get you to the promised land quicker and faster and more efficiently than ever before. And you may be duplicating efforts that came from your core. But, it's the way you go to clients right now. Microsoft, if you want to work with you, you don't have to buy the whole thing at once. You can end up buying a solution for a set of problems that you have and buy them to implement immediately. This is where the return's going to be. But I think when you look at what is the biggest difference between a success and not a success right now in banking, it's your leadership team. Are you willing to break away from, while still remembering your legacy, but breaking away from your legacy to look at the future of banking as it's going to present itself with data, AI, employee relations, being able to upskill your team and make them feel comfortable in a new environment that's going to be foreign to them. Because at the same time we're trying to change leadership, we're trying to change employees at the same time, employees that inherently don't trust the digital future because they vision it as the replacement of their jobs. That's our job as leaders to do.
Yeah, and that leadership piece is really important, because the leadership team that has to create the vision to get there, but then how do they communicate that vision so that people buy into the reason why this technology is actually going to help them and play into the dynamic that these colleagues around the bank are actually seeing outside of the bank, right? Because outside of the bank, they're using mobile, they're using technology, they're starting to use generative AI on their own. And so there is an expectation that they should have those tools available to them inside as well to do their jobs, create efficiency, and serve their customers and compete better. So it's an interesting dynamic, right, around how you tap into that.
Streaming services. They see their streaming services where Netflix learns as they watch TV. They see Amazon that learns as they buy things. They see things such as Uber that continues to feed them more than just their transportation journey. But I was in Uber the other day in a foreign country that was telling me, here's the restaurants you need to visit based on your previous eating habits. Here's things you want to do based on your previous journeys you've had in other countries. And it's providing suggestions. This is happening all around us. And when we don't get that, when we don't get the simplicity, if we don't get the empathy, for lack of a better word, from your financial institution partner, you're not going to be able to move forward. And, Microsoft is a great example of an organization that's really transformed itself over time to be future ready. But that's only good for today, because future ready tomorrow may look a whole lot different, as we learned with generative AI, that anything can change in an instant. And that's where the power is. That's where the opportunity in my entire 40 plus career in banking has never been greater than it is today, because of all these new tools. Now, when you go to see a financial institution, you can probably tell pretty quickly if they invite you in simply to say they invited you in, or if they really wanted to engage. And I had somebody say one time in Kenya, saying the only thing that can disrupt digital transformation is when bankers can't get out of their own way. And boy, that rings so true, where a lot of times we'll want to buy something, and then we'll say, oh, but one thing, I want to still have this from the past as part of this. And you go, you've just completely undermined everything we were trying to sell you. And that's what happens when change happens so fast.
But something interesting happened in COVID, Jim, where the industry, if you had said that the financial services industry could operate in an effective manner without any issues with moving 90% of the workforce to home, you would say that can't happen. But it did happen. And so there are a lot of things that made that happen in terms of decisions and being able to manage risk and risk accept things and move forward with things that you had to do to actually move forward. What have you seen from customers that you've been speaking with around how in COVID, people were able to make decisions and figure out how to solve and move quickly and provide leadership and guidance. But then the pendulum kind of swung back a little bit to now a little bit of the, getting bogged down with decision making and, kind of moving back at a slower pace. Any last thoughts on that, around where you've seen organizations kind of break through on that?
Boy, what a great story, because I do remember COVID checks. I mean, I still remember that the whole issue of COVID checks or COVID loans were actually made on a Thursday by the government. What could go wrong? But they were having to come out with the business support by Monday. And they did that without anybody being in the offices, with everybody getting a brand new product put on their table, and they had to do it. They made it happen. It's a great story, because it really, it's what I go back to going, hey, you've done this before. I think the sense of urgency, because the banking world continues to run at a consistent pace with each other. I look at the issues such as instant payments. We still see financial institutions that have not embraced instant payments because there wasn't the typical payback. And that's where legacy leadership, again, truly gets in the way. And so what happens is, I'm seeing right now the organizations that are doing the best job of moving forward at speed and scale are the smallest and the largest. The smallest because they already have the management team in place to say, I can't wait around. I want to be in the future. I want to be part of the future. I'm going to take a lot of these composable solutions and implement them, and I'm going to do so at scale. The bigger organizations, because they have the finances. It's the middle organizations that have less financing and more legacy leadership that I think the biggest challenge is. I think right now, as I mentioned, I'm extraordinarily excited about what's possible, but I also say, as I told you, you can look at these organizations that come to you, and within a real quick amount of time, you can see if this is going to be, simply talking the talk as opposed to walking the walk. I think what organizations need to do is look, as you brought up, at organizations that are not in the banking world and say, more and more, this is what the consumer's demanding. It's not what they're expecting. They're demanding. When they don't get that, they have a hard time understanding, why can't you do what my GPS system does in my car? Why do you continually give me a rear view, mirror view as opposed to GPS view? Why can't you do what Netflix does, which is taking basic data and applying it towards giving me recommendations for my future? This is where generative AI is going to be a game changer, is that it will allow organizations to build these digital twins, if you were, and be able to provide ideas for the future that will work on my behalf. The concierge at the hotel that says, based on what I know about you, based on when you checked in, here's things that I believe you'd enjoy. and you guide it, and it learns from that. I mean, when I show up to Marriott now, most Marriotts have my temperature in the room at the temperature that they know I go to every time I stay there. They know if I'm going to take water or points. They know what I'm going to want as a snack, and they're using this now to make it so it feels more at home, makes it easier for me to engage. I think this is what's going to change the banking industry is the consumer's going to drive it based on what they get at the grocery store, their restaurant, their streaming service, and their retailer.
Oh, wow. Thanks for putting that in perspective around where banking is going, where it can be, how it can be much more immersed in what we do as individuals and companies, and the excitement around what the technology can do to get there. So, in closing, I'm curious, with all the consulting you do, all the advisory work that you do, what's the one or two messages that you want to make sure you leave behind, right, in terms of that advice and counsel to the individuals that you speak with?
I'm going to go back to this podcast that you're developing. To be ready for the future, you need to take on a learning mentality beyond what you've never done before. It doesn't end at school anymore. Generative AI on a daily basis gives you the ability to have questions answered based on the universe. I mean, I use it regularly to say, tell me what I should talk to Bill about in his podcast. Here's the subject matters. What do I have to make sure I bring up based on my voice in the industry? If people do not continually focus on learning what's new and position themselves as to where can I play in that world, you will be left behind, because the reality right now is generative AI not only gives you the ability to change the products, but it gives you the ability to change your mindset in a way that you're going to be able to deliver what's needed in the future based on what's happening in the entire marketplace. Access to learning has never been easier. The need for learning and the requirement of learning has never been greater. So that's why podcasts such as yours, the type of things you're doing at your organization for your clients, the ability to break down solutions into a manageable format to deploy them, that's going to be the difference. One of the things I continually say to people is embrace change, take risks, and disrupt yourself to be ready for the marketplace of the future.
No, that's awesome. Awesome feedback. Awesome perspective around, top of mind, how to get going, how to have the energy and passion and the courage to move forward with this exciting technology and opportunity for change. So, Jim, thank you so much for joining my first episode. What a treat to have you help me kick things off. But I really appreciate your time, your insights, and really having a great conversation.
Thanks, Bill.
And thanks to all of you out there for tuning into my first episode of the Borden Line. I look forward to my next conversation in the series and hope you'll all come back and join me. Thanks again, everyone.